Estate Agency X number 5 just finished. It was an awesome event. We had John Abbott, who's the Director of Digital at HM Land Registry. He came in and he talked about blockchain and how you'll be able to exchange on a property within a week, and that technology is not even that far away. We had Mike Symes, who is the former head of marketing for the Bank of New York Financial, came in and spoke about brand, how brand really works, talked to people about the essence of their brand. Andrew Priestley came in and he spoke about how selling works in today's world and why we've potentially been getting it wrong for the last 100 years. Daniel Priestley, best-selling author of Oversubscribed, world business expert, just an awesome guy, came in and he spoke to us about 7-11-4, how the brain works, how we need to get a little bit more clever with our data. And then I spoke at the end just about how estate agents are running the wrong systems in their business. They're heading into the wrong direction. They need to start thinking a bit cleverer about the systems they employ to do their marketing so that they can thrive in the 2020s and not die. It was a brilliant event. I want to say thanks to all those who came. Like or share this post if you came, leave a comment. Look forward to seeing you at the next one.
The first thing to note is we've taken the land register and broken it, made it a more digital land register, broken it up a bit. So we've made it more straightforward for people to understand what you can and can't do with that property early on. So at the beginning, it's owned by Lisa White, and you can see that typically what you would get from the land registry is a PDF that you probably need to give to a lawyer, and they'd read it and understand it, and they'd tell you that there are things you can't do, like mine it and build a factory and use the land for business and so on. What we've done instead is we've broken that data out of a PDF and we've made it more structured and easy to understand so that anyone that perhaps was looking to buy the land or advise their client on buying the land understands exactly what you can and can't do with it up front. So it's going back to that point at the beginning about how can you make this data a little bit more useful for people, how can you make it more straightforward for people to make pretty important decisions sooner in the process. So Lisa White's the person that owned it. Let me just start the video again. So then what happens is we log on as the seller's conveyancer. So seller's conveyancer, first of all, goes and requests from NatWest that they discharge the mortgage. So the way it works is this is the smart contract being created and the conditions being introduced into the smart contract. And the seller knows that when they sell the property, they're going to need the old mortgage discharged. So they ask NatWest to do that. Somebody at NatWest goes in, logs into their system and agrees, sort of pre-approves the discharge of the mortgage, only if £110,000 is paid off. And they're happy to do that because they know that these smart contracts will enforce all of those rules. The seller's conveyancer then goes through and creates the sales agreement. Again, they do this all online. There's an API that MyHomeMove could use to build this into their casework system. In this case, they built a quick web application on the top. They then send that sales agreement across to Mishcom, who again can go in and view the property, all beautifully sort of broken up and kind of easy to interpret for them rather than giving them a PDF and asking them to spend some time reading it. And they add some more information to the smart contract, in particular the need to add a charge and add a new mortgage. They then go through and review the sales agreement and they've accepted it. So the lawyers, albeit in a relatively straightforward process, have gone through and created a sales contract. So one lawyer's created a sales contract. They've put some conditions in it around, when their house is going to transfer, the price, and so on. And they've also said when this contract executes, please remove the mortgage from the register only if I'm paid £110,000, I think it was. And then the buyer's conveyance has gone through, reviewed it, and agreed things like the price and so on. They're now sending that contract to Lisa White. So Lisa White was the person that currently owns the property, so the seller, and she gets a text message. She logs in, and knowing that her conveyancer has reviewed those contracts, she's now going to go through and sign them. So she's signing her transfer form for land registry and the sales contract. And now she's going to go in and verify her identity with the OT. She has to do that with a photo. Like I say, the reason she has to do a photo is because it's a high-value transaction. What it does now is it takes a picture of Lauren and compares that with her passport, her driving license, checks she's still alive in terms of, is she moving and so on, and then lets her, you don't want anyone taking pictures of you when you're dead, selling your house, and then the buyer goes ahead and does the same. What the buyer's doing, though, is signing a few more things. So the buyer, in particular, is signing their mortgage deed with NatWest, and as well as their transfer, but also agreeing to pay the stamp duty. You can just see that at the bottom there, and they go through the same kind of process. So again, let me just pause there. So that's kind of neat from a citizen or a buyer and seller's perspective, and from a conveyance perspective, it's entirely online. There's no faxing, there's no signing of witnesses and so on and so forth. It's all done online and sort of at their convenience wherever they like. But the smart contract backs bit is really neat, because not only have they signed those contracts online and in a natively digital way, they've also been able to sign these contracts that can execute themselves, that have code within them. So now what happens on completion day is not an awful lot, really. So it basically says we've now, it's first of all transferred the funds, the deposit, and now we've fast forwarded time to completion day, and all you're doing, because everything just happens through the smart contract, the money's moved, the stamp duty's paid, the land register's updated, the old charge is taken off, the new charge is added, etc., is you're just going in and just saying, hey, it's all worked. Says to the seller, remember to send your keys. Says to the buyer, remember to get your keys. And then, I just missed it, but you can see, hopefully, just about there, you can see that the land register for us, really importantly, has been updated. So we think the process in the future might end up looking something a little bit like that. That process of exchange and completion happens online in a way that's easier and more convenient for buyer and seller, happens for conveyancers directly in their casework system, so they don't have to fill in PDFs and send them to us or use our portal or anything like that. Happens on top of a register that's broken up and is more structured and more useful and easier for people to interpret, whether they're a professional or whether they're just kind of a citizen interested in a property. And happens in a way where everything is, or as much as possible, all of the administrative work is as automated as possible. If you wanted to kind of do that in real life, we think you could go from offer to exchange in a kind of period of a week or something like that. That's the kind of target. I'd be really disappointed if in 2 years we weren't doing digital transfers with people signing contracts digitally. I kind of think as an industry we'd failed, and certainly from our perspective, as the organisation that's involved at the beginning and at the end, we want to enable people to do that. But to an extent, it's down to the conveyancers and the banks and so on. But knowing the folks in the industry, there are enough people pushing hard enough that I would expect it to happen in 2 years.
It's how we put ourselves out there, how we show up, that actually really matters. And we sure better do that in a distinctive and different way. And I'll share with you some of the ways in which we can do that. Seth Godin, the guy who wrote Purple Cow, imagine a field of black and white cows and there's a purple cow in the middle of that field. It's not just something that you notice, it's something that's remarkable. You remark upon it. You wouldn't sort of go by and say, oh, purple cow in that field. You'd probably tell some other people about it, right? So he basically said, in a crowded market, fitting in is a failure. I couldn't agree more. Just doing the same thing as everybody else is not going to do any good. Not standing out is the same as being invisible. And nobody wants to be invisible in the room. Everybody wants to be able to command with their particular audience, in their particular locale, or their particular niche, exactly what they stand for. But it's a real challenge to stand out, even if you're a little green frog with bright red eyes. In a world of bright green frogs with bright red eyes, you still don't stand out, okay? So there are 3 commitments that everybody needs to make if they're taking their brand and their business really seriously. The first one is to think differently from other people. Apple, Steve Jobs had the thought of effectively putting the core essence right at the heart of the Apple brand, and they didn't do so badly, right at the heart of the Apple brand of being different. Think different. Forgive the vocabulary, he's American. But he said, think different rather than think differently. And again, that stood out in the marketplace because no one was talking in those sorts of colloquial sort of terms at the time about something that was cool and was creative. And they particularly decided that they were going to focus on early adopters, the creative community, in order to power Apple. And then suddenly everybody became creative. And with the democratization of the internet, with the democratization of Apple, you effectively had something that actually struck a note with people. So what are the next notes out there to be struck? Really thinking about those. Part of the reason why we're here today is to be challenged to actually come up with some new notions about what tomorrow might look like. This is a real opportunity to think about how can you be more creative in terms of the way you position your business. And we'll talk about some of those ways shortly. The next one is a commitment to clarity. Now, I get to see a lot of investor pitches at financial marketing. We all do as directors. And one of the issues that we face, of course, is that the majority of pitches potentially could fail on that point, on that single point of clarity. Because if an investor doesn't get it within the first 5 seconds, first 10 seconds, you've lost that pitch. So actually being super clear about what you're all about really, really matters. It sounds like a blinding glimpse of the obvious, but that relevance, that clarity, that need to be remarkable, they're all fundamentally important things that need to be considered when building a brand. The last one, and certainly not least, is a commitment to being super consistent in everything that you do, to show up consistently, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. That doesn't mean to say it needs to be boring. It doesn't mean to say it needs to be something that's the same as everybody else in the market. But certainly you need to deliver your brand promise consistently. What else do we do that isn't just to play the game? You know, most people effectively are at the basic market entry level of playing the game. How do we raise the bar? It can't be left to chance. It's not an accident. It's not something that happens to us. We've got to take control of the market and take control of our brands. Bruce Springsteen, otherwise known as the Boss, has basically come out with what I think is probably the best branding message I've ever seen from anybody, and particularly around sustaining an audience. It's hard. It demands consistency of thought, consistency of purpose, and consistency of action. Now, those things are really important. Those 3 points are really the challenge for everybody in the room. So demanding a consistency of thought, we've got to think more creatively. We've got to have that clarity of purpose, that absolute laser-driven clarity of what I stand for. Now, to Disney Corporation, it's about being magical. They boiled it down to one word. To Harley Davidson, it's about being liberating. It's about a middle-aged guy riding a Harley on a Sunday morning in a leather jacket and scaring the hell out of people. That's what the vision is, that Route 66 experience, or wind in the hair motoring if I had any. But that would be the thing, that you actually conjuring up an experience for people. And we talked about experience early on. Mark talked about experience early on and how important experience is to the markets that you serve. That experience is something that permeates everything that you do. And one of the biggest questions we can all ask, and is really worth committing to mind today, is how do we leave our customers feeling? That's a really fundamental question that is really important to ask ourselves. How do we leave our customers feeling? And if it's not right, take ownership of it and change that experience. Own that experience. So consistency of thought, purpose, and action, and importantly, over a long period of time. This is something that is built up over months, years of being consistent in the market. The issue, of course, is that if you ask the majority of people within sales what their unique selling propositions are, they'll come out with a whole host of the same things as their competitors. And we've done that, and pretty unerringly, it tends to come up with the same sort of things. So it's about speed, it's about strength, it's about flexibility, it's about being supportive, it's about having integrity, and these are table stakes. These are not things that will make you stand out in the market. They won't make the blindest bit of difference. And that is the area where we all need to take focus in terms of our creativity. We all need to and have the opportunity to stand out in the marketplace, but actually being the same as everyone else isn't going to get us there.
This is a guy called Walter Dill Scott, who in 1902 wrote a book called The Psychology of Selling and Advertising. And I can't tell you how big a book that was and how much it sold, how many copies it sold. It's phenomenal how many books it sold. If you read it today, if you go hunting for his book, it's a really interesting read. It's a little bit hokey now, but at the time, it was just groundbreaking. And it really, really captured this whole thing about the psychology of selling. But also, what happened around about the same time was three massive big trends. In 1904, mass production started. Okay? That was the first big trend, mass production. We could produce cars. The second big trend was the disposable income of people trebled in 1905. So it went from 500 to 1,500. Okay? And the three biggest products on the planet became cars, houses, and if you had a car and a house, it was then insurance. So we've got the ability to mass produce stuff, right? And if you own a car and that, you better insure it. Now, the number one fire policy in 1905 was fire policy. Insurance was fire. The fire that burnt down San Francisco, in money then, was 90 to 100 million in damages. So you imagine what the insurance was, right? A lot of those claims were never claimed because their policy burnt in a fire, so they couldn't prove that they actually had a policy, okay? So here's what happened. From about 1904, look at the price of a car, $850, and then the house was $725. Unbelievable, right? And insurance. Now here's what happened. The problem was, if people got disposable income and we've got the ability to mass produce a lot of stuff, the goal is to try and get people to buy what we have as quickly as possible. It's to try and make that sale happen, okay? So by about 1920, it was an absolute mess. Absolute mess. What works, what doesn't work, nobody knew. So the three top industries, real estate, automobile and insurance, got together and they approached Stanford University and they went to a guy called E.K. Strong. And E.K. Strong did some research for them. In fact, what he did was a whole lot of meta-analysis in which he looked at what was available, what was for sale, etc., etc. And out of that, he came up with a booklet which I believe is a pivotal book in the history of selling if you're into sales. I don't recommend you read it because it's a really very dry argument. But it was so important because what he did was he captured all of the knowledge that was going around at the time. And he put it into a book, and from that, the real estate industry, the insurance industry, and the vehicle industry came up with all their own books and their own training programs. And training was a huge business in the 1920s, absolutely huge, like it is today, right? Unbelievably so. This is the problem though. See, E.K. Strong was a professor and he was bound by a code of ethics even back then, right? So what he did was he kept looking at what was working, and he republished his findings in 1925, and then he republished them again in 1927. And this is what he said: basically, what I told you in 1922 is wrong. And this is a really important point I'm making here. Right? What I told you was wrong. Now, the problem in 1920 was the cost to reproduce anything, to reprint the books, to scrap all your books, scrap all your training programs, right, was so horrendous that the industry said, no, no, it's working. We'll stay with what we've got. We'll just stay with what we've got. See, one of the things that E.K. Strong discovered was there was a resistance point in 2000, right? In 1920, and it was about $99. And $99 over that was a considered purchase. So these techniques that he talked about worked under $99, but over $99 they don't work. And he said, what does work? And this is the bit I want you to get. If you get nothing else from today, this is the bit that he said does work. Relationships. That's what works in a considered purchase. The quality of the relationship. It's documented. It's right there. You can read it. He says if you want to sell big ticket, multi-sale items, it's the quality of the relationships you've got, not the quality of your tricks.
So inside the brain, we have to figure out what's going on in each person's brain, and there are some common elements between people, even though everyone's different. The first common element is this little thing called the limbic system, and you can think of the limbic system as like a bit of a bodyguard, and the bodyguard or the bouncer at the door of the nightclub, and the bouncer at the door is saying, you're not allowed in, you've got to stay out, all this sort of stuff, and it's essentially this idea that we only do business with people who we know, like, and trust. So it's very important that we know and like and trust people, or else the limbic system has the guard up. It says, I'm not going to do business with you. I had an experience where I was in Bali. I was walking through the marketplace, and it was a really busy marketplace, and I'd been there for about 4 or 5 days. Has anyone been to Bali or Indonesia, somewhere like this, right? And you go into these busy marketplaces and they just throw stuff at you. So it's like t-shirts and watches and trinkets, and you can definitely get a Rolex in Bali. And they're kind of, literally kitchen sink. So they're throwing, here's a kitchen sink, right? And they come up with all these sorts of things. So on about day 3 or day 4 of going through the market, you just completely switch off to the environment, and it's actually weird how numb you can be, or how switched off you can be if you want to be. So literally walking through the Balinese market, and someone will grab your arm and try and pull you towards the stall, and you just kind of brush it off, and you're kind of walking through, and people physically stand in front of you, and you just move around them. And it's just crazy that you, within a few days, can completely adapt a strategy for fending people off left, right, and center, and going straight to wherever it is you want to go to. So I'm in this market, and people are coming at me left, right, and center with their offers: buy this, buy this, buy this, buy this, and I'm just like Neo style. And then I see a friend of mine who I used to do business with 3 or 4 years earlier, and I see him across the market, and I, Bo, oh my goodness, Bo, I haven't seen you for ages. So I make my way around and tap him on the shoulder. I say, Bo, and he goes, right? And I said, no, it's Dan. And he goes, oh, Dan, how are you, right? And we start talking. He goes, do you want to grab a beer? Let's go get down on the beach and grab a beer. We start chatting, and of course we end up doing some deals, and we do some stuff together. And it was easy and effortless. And that's the difference between the limbic system being up or the limbic system being down. So when my limbic system is up, it doesn't matter what someone throws at me in the marketplace. I can just fend it off. But when I know, like, and trust someone because there's a relationship, I actually seek them out, go looking for them, go out of my way, and then they go out of their way. They clear their diary to go and have a conversation with me. So one of the first things we have to understand is that we have to get past this know, like, and trust system, right? So the know, like, and trust system is an interesting system. We're all very primitively built. We haven't evolved much in 70 to 100,000 years, believe it or not. And the way the limbic system works out who's a friend and who's not a friend is it has this little system called a 7-11-4 system. So the 7-11-4 system is, have I spent 7 hours with you before? Have we interacted more than 11 times? And have I seen you in more than 4 locations, 4 places? And that's basically how the system works. All the research points to one of 3 different ways that the body triangulates or the brain triangulates, are we friends or not? And when you've spent more than 7 hours with someone, they're a friend. When you've interacted with them more than 11 times, they must be a friend, or they're moving into the friend camp. When you've met someone in 4 places, so you can kind of imagine on the savannah, you know, it's just we're trying to figure out who's part of the tribe, who's not part of the tribe. Well, if we get past 7 hours, 11 interactions, 4 locations, and they haven't thrown something at us or tried to eat us or anything like that, it's probably safe, right? So it's that very, very simple system of moving from stranger to friend. And once we're in the friend camp, then we're interested to have conversations, interested to chat. It's interesting, spent all of high school trying to get out of the friend zone, and now we try and figure out how to get into the friend zone, right, in business. So Google did all the research on this, 0 moments of truth. If you want to read one research paper, it's called 0 moments of truth, and it basically looked at when do people buy and how much research do they do prior to buying, and they found all of these types of things to be relevant. Combine the thought of 7-Eleven-4 with personal brand, and now we go into digital assets, and you get an interesting phenomenon starting to happen. And the cool thing with digital assets is, as I said, we haven't evolved much in 100,000 years. Brains don't actually understand the difference between real people and digital people, or digital personas and real personas. We don't know that it's digital. Our brains don't get that it's digital. And the reason I can share with you a great example of that, 2016, incredibly sad year for many reasons, but all the celebrities that started dropping off. I mean, if you remember 2016, it was every month some icon was kicking the bucket. They kind of all knew when the time was to check out, I think. But like, who felt sad when David Bowie died, right? Or Prince, or Muhammad Ali, right? Or Princess Leia. Oh my goodness, right? So all of these icons where you actually feel sad. So what was the other one? Robin Williams. Who felt sad when Robin Williams died, right? It's really sad. Who here had actually spent real time with Robin Williams, right? I don't think it. Yeah, well, you feel like you have, right? You watch Peter Pan and listen to Aladdin and all these kind of things. So you feel a connection. Dead poets feel a connection to Robin Williams, but you never actually spent time with Robin Williams. And the reason you feel a connection is your brain doesn't know the difference between digital and analog. We don't know the difference between watching television and meeting someone in real life. So if you flip this and you actually start thinking about the idea that if you had a great video that explains who you are, what you're passionate about, what you do in the real estate space, if you put that video on YouTube, let's say it's 6 or 7 minutes long, that's the same, for the person watching it, that's the same as having a quick meeting with you. So if you go to networking functions where you're wandering around meeting someone, having quick little 6 or 7 minute interactions, you could probably meet 7 or 8 people in an evening going to a networking function. It would be very hard to get a YouTube video that didn't do 7 or 8 views in a day on autopilot, right? Just getting, just people discovering it and finding it, especially if you link it to a few different things. So the person watching that, their brain doesn't know it's digital. What's interesting is that companies are going this way. So digital assets are actually replacing physical assets. In 1975, of the top 500 companies in the US, they were mostly made up of tangible assets, and they had a tiny little bit of leftover residue where they were overvalued by 15-20%, and they just called that the intangible value of that company. Fast forward to 2015, and it's about 85% of the value of the company is we don't know what to call that, right? So we know that you've got factories and machinery and all these things that traditionally go on a balance sheet, but I don't know how to value the YouTube videos, and I don't know how to value the data on a database and all these sorts of things. And all of that goes into one massive column that they still call intangibles. And they're just basically, it's like accountants speak for we don't know. We don't, you should be worth 15 billion, you're worth 100 billion, we're not sure why. So we'll call it an intangible value. And it's digital assets, that's what it is. Airbnb is worth a lot of money, not because they own a lot of property, it's because they have a database and a user base and a brand with a lot of people. We are just crazy for digital. We are insane about it.
So every single day, 2 hours and 51 minutes is the average time spent on the phone, on the device. You're all sitting there going, I would never spend 2 hours and 51 minutes on my device. Go and check. Pull out the phone, right, and have a look, and it'll tell you how long you're spending on your phone, right? Normally, if you break it down, it's 171 minutes across 76 sessions. That's what your daily average is. In fact, in this room, it's probably a bit higher than that. Right? So that's the average. What's crazy is that for every person who barely uses a smartphone, someone on the other side of the bell curve is doing double that average. They're doing 150 sessions a day, 300 plus minutes in there. So the brain is just loving this because it's real to the brain. It's a portal to the rest of the world. You travel around, meeting people, learning things, going crazy on this online social media stuff. This is actually the most important real estate. You guys are into real estate. This is the most important real estate. Two pieces of real estate that you need to, if you want to be good at anything, two pieces of real estate you need to tune into is the real estate called the screen and the real estate called the brain, right? So that's 6 inches there and that's 6 inches in there. They're the two bits of real estate that control everything at the moment. So you've got to really understand, how does your real estate look on that real estate? So the next 10 years, the next 10 to 20 years of marketing is not social media marketing, it's data analytics marketing. You've got to get really good at data analytics and this sort of stuff. The machines that are going to move into your industry, the next big billion-dollar companies, the next successful companies that come into every industry are going to have this kind of approach. They're going to be talking to people exactly at the time they want to hear, exactly the people that matter. They're going to drill down on that data. They're going to have sophisticated ways of getting the data and sophisticated ways of using the data. And one of the reasons I come and speak at Iceberg is because Mark is on the cutting edge of this, right? So I want to keep in touch with Mark. I love the ongoing conversation that I have with Mark and Haley about how do you do this properly? How do you actually, because we market this way in our industry. Mark is an expert in this. So this is a really, really powerful way that you want to build. You want to build a customized journey for every single person who's going through. And it could be hundreds of different marketing campaigns all firing off at once, all very different in their way of delivery. So we have a massive sea change coming, huge wave of innovation. Digital meets data, meets personal brand. All of these things totally change the landscape. You're either going to be on the surfing side of that wave or you'll be swept out to sea. It's really, that's how the 2020 is going to be. You paddle like crazy now and you adjust your business and you get your surfboard in the right position so you can surf the wave, or you go, whoa, what just happened? And now you're...
How you hit the emotional side of the brain. Like Dan said, 7-11-4. The customer journey, it requires companionship. They figured this out. If you go on this long journey with somebody, guess what? They buy stuff from you and they don't even argue about the price. So the 7-11-4 shows us that whilst estate agents, so many estate agents I talk to, and some of you will remember having this conversation with me previously, say there's no way we could charge more than, 1% in our area. Like, no way. I know Fine and Country do it. I know I've seen someone else does it, but you don't understand that where we are, people are literally, they'll sell a house for like 100 quid. So we're already expensive, right? You all have had that conversation, right? But it doesn't make any sense. Like, look at this comparison, Samsung versus Apple. And it's not an argument about whether a Samsung is better than an Apple phone, like, because an Apple phone's better. But right, no, but seriously, right, it doesn't matter whether you're a Samsung user or an Apple user. But the point is that the Samsung has got better memory than the iPhone. It's got a better display than the iPhone. It's got a better waterproof rating than the iPhone. It weighs less than the iPhone. It costs less than the iPhone. And everyone buys the fucking iPhone. How? That's just ridiculous. It's because no iPhone users, myself included, know or give a shit what memory their phone's got. I've got no idea, right? I don't know what RAM it's got. I don't know what the display is. I don't know any of that stuff. Something inside me just says it's just the best phone. And so Apple can run ads like, Samsungs are great, but it's not an iPhone. And every Apple user would be like, yeah. Right? It's just an emotional thing. That's how 7-Eleven-4 works. You get people to get emotionally attached to your brand. I think everybody can understand that makes sense, but how and why does it not work in a estate agency? So the first thing you need to have a data-driven company. What that actually means is that you have to grow an audience, and those people that you once considered time wasters are actually potentially more valuable than the ones who do some sort of transaction with you right now. Because the time wasters haven't yet finished their 7-Eleven-4 journey, so you still have the opportunity to do it. The software that estate agents use, your Vibras, your Repits, your Dupix, you can name any of them, it doesn't matter. Even some of the ones that have come out at the moment and say like they're incredible, they don't have the right infrastructure behind them because they work on a transactional basis. So you put people in, if let's say for instance you do a valuation with somebody, you put them in the system, you chase them, you put them in a 1 to 31 system, you put them in a callback diary, you chase them and ask for the transaction. Eventually they stop taking your phone calls and you've got nothing left to talk to them about, and they just sit in your database. Nothing happens with the data. One of a certain industry expert I was at a conference with recently said, and millennials are the problem because they just leave the data and they don't get on the phones and they don't do anything. All they want to do is press buttons and da 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 da. And I said to him, like, millennials are not the problem, they're the solution. They're not expecting to put data in a system that does fuck all with it. They're expecting it to actually do something, rather than I put the data in the system, and then what does it do with it? Nothing. You have to get the notepad, and then you phone people up, right, and forward the date when you're going to phone them next. It's like, what did I put it in the system for? I don't know. That's just what we do. So the way it works is that they don't do this. This is mental, right? This is what leads you to running 21 different systems. What they do is they do this. They have a person in the middle of it, and the systems automatically do the other stuff. You haven't got to figure out when to send emails out or what ads to run on Facebook. You haven't got to figure any of that stuff out. The systems already do it. The systems track what people look at and what they do, and then it puts the right things in front of them so that they move through the funnel. That's how it works for modern businesses. So if someone's come along and sold you this idea of this amazing email marketing platform, and you can log on and you can design your own campaigns and you can do this and you can do that, well, literally you're just wasting your time. Like, just the systems do it all. You don't have to do that. You can just be an estate agent and just be good at that. So in that system, what happens is she is thinking about selling her property, so she sees the instant valuation ad, she goes on Facebook, she fills out the instant valuation ad. Next time she goes on Facebook, the system knows, don't show ads, because let me go back, right, because she is in an ecosystem here, it knows, bing, she's done an instant valuation. So in Facebook now, don't show her instant valuation ads anymore. So what it does now, next time she goes on Facebook, she does her instant valuation, next time she goes on Facebook, it shows her whatever it is you've decided someone who's done an instant valuation ad should see next. Maybe it's a video that says, in this year alone, we've sold over £500 million worth of property in the local area. We just got voted best estate agent in, the southeast. We've won these different awards. If you're thinking about selling your property and you've ever done an instant valuation, you should probably consider having someone around your house for a face-to-face valuation, because the instant valuations are just algorithms. So you might actually be underestimating what your property's worth. If you want to book for a face-to-face valuation, click the button below, right? And only people that have seen instant valuations would see that ad. So you haven't got to interrupt everybody with it. Most people couldn't give a shit about all that stuff. But it will be relevant to her. So she sees that ad and she's happy again. And maybe she takes action, maybe she doesn't. But it continues her on the 7-Eleven-4 path of thinking like, these guys are great. We know what she's thinking all the way through. Like Andrew laid out, this is what the person's thinking, this is what we do. and the system will just figure it all out for you. And because of that, she moves the right way in the funnel. And she, at some point, just comes out the other end. Companies in today's world, they use data to build defensive walls around their company. And estate agents don't do that. And that is probably the most risky thing in our industry. So to explain this, I wanted to use Google as an example. So effectively, Google's just a search engine, right? And there's loads of search engines. So what's the point? I mean, what makes Google so valuable? Possibly the most valuable company on the planet. It's just a search engine. I mean, you know, Yusuf, our CTO, he could build me a search engine just like Google, probably take a day, right? It's really not that complicated. But the thing with Google is that where most products age and get worse, Google actually gets better with time. Right? There's 3.7 million Google searches run every minute of the day. And Google knows all of your deepest, darkest secrets. Right? It knows all of your worries. It knows what you're worried about with your children. It knows what your aspirations are. It knows so much that it knows the question you're asking before you've even finished typing it. Right? And it gives you the answer. It's got 20 years worth of data in this system. And that's what makes Google so valuable. Anyone can build a search engine and no one can build Google. Literally, no one can ever beat Google at what they do unless somehow you can fast forward to having 20 years worth of data and 3.7 million searches run every second. So Google have got to fuck that up in a big way to get knocked off of that perch. I just swore again, didn't I? Yeah, sorry about that. Estate agency. Let's look at that in estate agency terms. Imagine if you could have a business that just got more valuable just by being open. If you could make it so that it became more difficult for someone to go into competition with you just by being open. Right? That's how companies work today. So I'm going to put it into some examples of an agent that actually uses some of our systems to do this. Right? They use one of our tools called BAIT, which is all about valuations. It stores valuation data and then it nurtures those potential valuations and blah, 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 right? So they're a fine and country agent, so they've got high fees anyway, but the principle doesn't matter. They've got one office, and in the last 4 months of them using the BAIT system to put their market appraisals into that system, they've won £350,000 worth of business, been instructed on £350,000 worth of business. That's not the price of the house, that's just the fees, right? They lost £64,000 worth of fees. And for most estate agents, that's the only numbers they look at. It drives me mad because I talk to people and they say, we've got awesome conversion rates. We're at conversion rates 80%. It's like, bullshit, as if it is. I mean, that's not possible. But then you dig down, it's like, basically, for most estate agents, they have these three categories. There's people that instructed us, there's people that instructed another agent, and then there's a bunch of people that don't count. They didn't instruct anyone. It's like, what? So if I go out on 10 valuations, 9 of them don't instruct anyone, and 1 of them does, I've got a 100% conversion rate. That doesn't make any sense. And that's how most people look at it, right? But in the BAIT system, what you can see is that over that 4 months, he's got £1 million worth of business that his system is now putting the right stuff in front of them in Facebook, putting the right emails in front of them, telling him when the right things are, when the right time is to do stuff, and just nurturing them automatically. Okay, so if we start scaling that up, if he does that in 4 months, then that's £3 million worth of business every year. After 5 years, he's nurturing £15 million worth of business. That's not prices of houses, that's fees. £15 million worth of fees in his system being communicated with 24/7, 365 without him lifting a finger. Most estate agents have got more than that in their database, and it's not being communicated with in any way, shape or form whatsoever, unless they do this, let's do export this and let's send them an email and better see if we can get some more transactions today. There's nothing more than that. There's no funnel that is automatically pushing them through over the course of years. So, firstly, the two things that happen here is no one can go into competition with this guy. After 5 years, I can't just open up an estate agency and go into competition with him. He's nurturing £15 million worth of fees. He's in and out and amongst so much stuff, like Google. I can't just break into it suddenly. It's going to take me 5 years to get to that stage, and by then he's got another 5 years worth of stuff. And his company becomes incredibly more valuable because the only way of me opening up in his area is to buy him. And I'm not just going to pay him for his lettings book and a bit of goodwill for his pipeline. I've got to pay him some serious money now. That's why Google's so valuable. They've got all the data and there's no way of getting it unless you want to buy Google. A lot of you guys have got successful businesses. Like, cash flow isn't an issue. Things are working. And I can tell you now, they will carry on working. That guy that's spending £7,500 a month on leaflets is going to carry on working for him, no problem. He can just keep doing it until one of you guys do this in his area, and then he's fucked.